That's a Christmas present from a very dear friend of mine.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right. Attaboy, Clarence.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pantheon Plus, on a podcast here on the Real World Podcasting Network. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can also find me on Hive at JeromeC1985 as well. You can find us, the podcast, on Twitter at Hero Pantheon. Please leave a 4 or 5 star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify to help more people discover the great work that we are doing here at the Real World. Tonight we are ending our discussion of Christmas themed TV shows. Well, I guess it's not a TV show. We were originally we were going to discuss. I think we were going to talk about like an episode of Black Mirror, an episode of The X-Files, and an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But because of the running theme that It's a Wonderful Life has played into each of our 3 previous episodes, plus the fact that inexplicably Brian has never seen It's a Wonderful Life, we decided this was the time for us to finally sit down and discuss this movie. Many of you probably know my thoughts because on my 100 favorite movies list that I did in 2020, this was a prominent part of that. You can go back and read my review of that movie and just how much I love it. And yeah, so this is definitely one of my favorites. But Brian, having never seen it, which is just unbelievable to me, it still wows me to no end that you had never seen It's a Wonderful Life before this year. So Brian, how are you feeling? Do you feel like you are a more complete person for having seen this movie?
Feels like everything kind of came full circle because, I've probably seen A Christmas Story like at least 30 times because they played it over and over 24/7, Christmas Eve. That was kind of my generational thing. You know what I mean? That's why I think I'd never seen this before. But growing up now, I think it's Elf that TBS is playing 24/7. So there you go, a generational passing of the torch, right? But in this case, now that you mentioned Black Mirror, ironically, this felt like a really great extended movie of a Twilight Zone episode, and I mean in the best possible compliment. You know what I mean? I was kind of set up for like a Christmas Carol type tale where it's going to be a lot of flashback from like the second act onward, but in this case, it's actually the third act, which I was really surprised at. So that kind of threw me for a loop. So that kind of threw my expectations out the window, especially with a 2-hour and 10-minute runtime. I was kind of like, okay, this is not the Christmas movie I'm expecting, and it really wasn't a Christmas movie too much until the third act. And what's really cool about this set is that it's covered in snow all the time. Bedford Falls, so it's got this Christmas feel automatically. And then once you throw in the Christmas theme at the end with the holiday and everyone coming together to his house, it kind of comes full circle as a Christmas movie. So it kind of sneaks up on you as a Christmas movie for me, because for me it felt more kind of a sci-fi Twilight Zone kind of episode what it was building up to in the third act. And I kind of wish we had more Clarence, to be honest, because I really like that character. But yeah, credit to the casting director for casting a young Jimmy Stewart. An incredible job. I don't have his name in front of me, but this kid was amazing. This is like how you cast a kid actor. And it makes me think of like a show like Ms. Marvel, where it's like, okay, how can this kid be so good? And the teen actors on Ms. Marvel are so green in comparison. You know what I'm saying? This kind of blew my mind in terms of what child acting can be. And you'd think I'd learned my lesson with Train to Busan when the little girl was like out acting everybody in a movie where everyone is acting great. But in this case, this kind of reaffirmed my, belief that you can actually get a great kid actor and put him in a role and not just put a green kid in there because they're cute.
I'm going to ignore your Ms. Marvel slander and just move on to talking about what makes this movie so good. So Robert J. Anderson is the person that you are looking for. That is the actor. Brian, I am about to blow your mind because let me see if this is official here. So he eventually transitions to becoming a producer and like a production manager. Do you want to know one of the movies that he was a production manager for? Demolition Man.
I wonder if he knows the answers to the three seashells question that everyone keeps asking after watching that movie, man, because no one knows the answer to that, but maybe he does. But goddamn, man, he was incredible. And in the notes you sent me, it's actually, you can see it on screen, but he gets really slapped on the ear, and that's real blood coming down his ear, which makes, I mean, perfect, kind of timing, because the character has a damaged left ear, so it just played off so well. But that's probably one of the best scenes in the movie for me. And like, just, he had a tremendous performance for 5 minutes, just being the young Jimmy Stewart in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think he does a great job, and I think that's a really good starting point, because I think what makes this movie so fascinating is that, like, if I were to teach a film class and I was talking about the concept of setup and payoff, I would show this movie, because I think this movie does an unbelievable job of just setting things up and then paying them off one by one. Like, everything from like the big things at the beginning when George saves his brother's life, like that is a seminal moment. It's because not only because he saves his life, but also because he goes deaf in one ear because of it. So you're like, those are like two really huge things, down to the smaller things with Uncle Billy and the little string that he has tied around his fingers. Like, that pays off tremendously well. And just they do that constantly throughout the movie. And the references to Mary being an old maid, and then she's an old maid in the alternate version of this world. So yeah, it's this movie does a great job of just paying those things off. I think what surprises a lot of people is that lack of Christmas. Like, very clearly the last half hour, it is very much a Christmas movie, but it's very much one of those things also where the first 90 minutes is like a biopic. It's like, this is the biopic of your average American white male living in a small town. Like, George Bailey is anyone USA, and you can see why this would have a certain amount of appeal, or why Frank Capra would make a movie like this, especially coming off of World War II. It's just unfortunate, like, when this movie first came out, like, it was a huge bomb, and really the only way that it became this classic of cinema is because of the fact that it was just aired constantly throughout the 70s, 80s, and early 90s on every TV station in multiple languages. And like, so many other TV shows have referenced it. Saturday Night Live has a skit where they show the real ending of It's a Wonderful Life. This is one of those movies that you absorb so much of it through other media, even before you see it in some cases. And I think that can also kind of hurt your enjoyment depending on what you see and what your feelings are in the movie, because of those things that you've seen in other media. I think the thing that always surprises me is that we have had so many iterations of A Christmas Carol. We've had like 3 sequels to A Christmas Story at this point, including the most recent one that came out on HBO Max. It's really surprising to me that nobody has tried to either remake It's a Wonderful Life, or, I mean, I guess The Christmas Carol and this share a lot in common, but I guess I'm surprised I have not seen this story ripped off more in other movies.
Well, my theory on that is because Mr. Deeds was such a shitty remake, even though I laughed at it. But I mean, that's another one, right? Another Frank Capra, Jamie Stewart, combo, and then Adam Sandler remade it years later, and then it was a raunchy Adam Sandler.
That was Gary Cooper. Brian, it was Gary Cooper, not Jimmy Stewart.
Oh, sorry. But still, it's like, it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. You know what I mean? So I think that's part of it. And probably people are worried that they're going to distarnish it so bad that it's going to, it's just going to insult the original. Maybe they're just trying to backpedal from it. Because maybe just Christmas Carol is just so much easier to adapt. And you got the backbone with the 3 ghosts and everything, and you just reinterpret it. But again, maybe, because I was expecting a story like that for this movie. So, that kind of like 180 that it pulled on me was really surprising. I mean, I do think it's a little too long, but only because you say it's more of a biography in the beginning, which is true, because everything, all the little scenes that I kind of like, or kind of like, maybe I can cut or snip here or there, cut it out a little bit, like the stuff when he was like at the night of the dance or whatever. Like I would have cut that down, but maybe, what he wanted to do was get you really connected with George and go through that arc and that journey. Because 2 hours and 10 minutes for a Christmas movie, I think you're asking a lot. But I don't know if it's just because we're so used to these 90-minute Christmas movies, like that Hallmark style, even like it's even adapted to the modern style, like Elf, Christmas Story. Those are like 90-minute movies. So for me, I was just kind of like taken aback. But because I'm so used to the black and white style anyway, and I love black and white movies, I was able to adapt to it really quick. But I really love the attention to detail in the sets. Everything looks so authentic and unique because they built a really big, like mile wide town for Bedford Falls, so it looks really great. And the way that they filmed the snow, like it just seems like it's an endless snowy town, so that really helped the effects as well. So I think that's kind of like my only little criticism, honestly. Everything else is like really top-notch writing, top-notch acting, and a really good villain who we can talk about, I guess, because he doesn't really get his comeuppance.
I mean, I think that's the whole point, though, is that, I mean, obviously this movie is not realistic because you literally have an angel in the damn movie, like, so it's not realistic. But I really appreciated the fact that I think in a lot of movies, Mr. Potter would like something would happen to him, but I kind of appreciate that nothing happens to him in the end, because I think that feels very true to life. Like the rich never get their comeuppance, and I think that's accurate in some ways. And again, I know this movie is not meant to be realistic in some ways, but I think that I think the problem is that, okay, so if we do something with Potter, I think that takes the attention away from the story that they're trying to tell. And to me, the important component is the life of George Bailey and the fact that he has lived this wonderful life. So I almost think like if you end the movie with something related to Potter getting his comeuppance, you're taking away like the actual focus of the movie, because the focus is from the very start on the life of George Bailey and just what a life he's lived. And like, I think people would say, oh, it's just this average American life. But like, because of what they choose to show, you see the direct impact that he has on so many people's lives. And that if he is not there, then there is a very real possibility that, maybe his wife never gets married and is as unhappy as a librarian. I don't know that I believe that would actually happen. I just don't believe that someone who looks like Donna Reed would never get married. Like, fundamentally, I just don't buy that. There's a lot of little things. And again, there's the big things, like the fact that pharmacist, like, what really struck me this time is that he gets this letter about his son dying of influenza, and especially after dealing with COVID the last couple of years, it's like just how real a pandemic feels now compared to probably when I first saw this movie. So there's that part of it as well, and just there's a lot of really great little moments, but I think the way that it sets things up and pays it off throughout, I think is pretty tremendous. Something else that I want to point out, I mean, this will be a good way to kind of guide us into talking about Jimmy Stewart's performance, but they really go out of their way in the first hour and a half to have George Bailey do a lot of really good things, like saving his brother's life, preventing the pharmacist from sending the wrong pills, like saving his business, letting his brother go off to college, the way that he treats Mary for the most part, I would say. But they go out of their way to show just how good of a guy he is, and like staying, not going on his honeymoon and giving money to all these people, like staying home during the Depression, helping during the war, even though he can't go himself. Because boy, oh boy, the last half hour, George says and does some things that, without the context of the first 90 minutes, you probably think that George Bailey's the worst person in the world.
I can't help but think of a re-edit. You know what I mean? Like, we just got that version, because I think that's the version that I was expecting. Like, I thought this was going to open with this, and then everything was just going to be in flashback, but they went chronological. So that really took me by surprise too. But I can't help but think like how different would you feel about George if you saw him as just being the asshole that he was? Because you literally see him like I think it's the conversation with Potter that you literally see him mentally like kind of just lose it, not lose it completely, but he just kind of gives up on everything. That $8,000 that you know, unfortunately his uncle loses and gives it to Mr. Potter on accident, which really fucking just that bugged me, but because it's so like it sucks. It really sucks. It gets you on an emotional level because you're just like, God damn it, that's just it feels like it's stolen, but it really wasn't. And I guess that's the point. Like Potter didn't steal the money; it was given to him. And what are you gonna do? Not give the $8,000 back? So I get it. I get it. But man, just that turn that he does, and the way that he's treating his kids or whatever, and I was like, okay, here we go, the big moment, and then it sets it up. But I think that scene with Potter, that well, at least there's many scenes with Potter between Bailey and Potter, but that one before he goes on that the Christmas Eve rant that he goes on. Just you can see it in his eyes, and I think maybe that's part of the note you sent me that he had PTSD from World War II. So this kind of reflects his feelings on that, like especially through the eye or through the character of his brother, which really we didn't touch on yet, but his brother saved a lot of people in the war. So if you go by the cause and effect rule, him not saving his brother causes other people to die in the war. So it's just kind of like you put things in perspective like that. It's really cool, like philosophical, and that's where that Twilight Zone kind of feel comes in, because now we get this glimpse into the multiverse. Things completely change, man, and I love the way that the town transitions from like small town feel to like urban kind of feel. Like it went from suburban to urban almost. It was like going from the San Fernando Valley to downtown LA and like all the clubs and stuff like that. That was a really cool little change that I don't think a lot of people picked up on, but I can kind of see it as like a class kind of change. You know what I mean? Did you pick up on that as well?
Oh, I absolutely did. But I mean, let's be honest. I think we would both much rather hang out in Pottersville than Bedford Falls. I think if you were raising families, like, of course you would want to live in Bedford Falls. But to hang out for a night, I think Pottersville would be much more fun.
Totally. But man, this is the little things, man. And I love that little detail that they changed the town. And it's not just the people. So that makes me think that they really
Well, and
thought
even
of
the
like
way
that,
that even the way that
the
people
script.
behave, I think
That
is
too.
is
Yeah. It was
like
really well done.
just like to have the police officer be just a little bit different, and the bartender, who's the owner in the alternate version, like just how different he is in terms of tone and character and the way that they treat other people. Like it's really notable, and like I think the acting across the board is very impressive for that reason. And yeah, again, I think the way that they treat George Bailey, and I think the journey that James Stewart goes on is pretty wild. Like in terms of this, if I think about like the first half of the 20th century, like the two actors that I probably enjoy the most are Jimmy Stewart and Humphrey Bogart. Like I certainly enjoy some Cary Grant, some Gary Cooper, some Spencer Tracy, but like in terms of movie for movie, like there's a lot of Jimmy Stewart movies that I really like. And It's a Wonderful Life, Rear Window. I know you're also a big fan of Rope, Vertigo. Like there's a lot of really good stuff that he's been in. Philadelphia Story. So yeah, there's tons, man. And Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is also very good. And so yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jimmy Stewart's and have watched like a ton of his movies from the 30s up until the 70s when he was doing mostly westerns. But I mean, I genuinely think this is his best performance. And I could also look at something like Rear Window, and like that's a really good Jimmy Stewart performance. Vertigo too, but to me, there's just something there's like this sweet spot where, like in Vertigo, it almost feels like he's a little too old for that particular role, but here it feels like he's just coming off fighting in World War II, so there's a weariness to the performance. I love the makeup job that they do subtly. Like he's supposed to be playing an 18-year-old, which that stretches credulity a little bit, but I think they do such a good job in that final half hour of just making him look beaten down. I mean, he just looks so sad in that final half
not
hour.
to mention the fact that he probably was weighing, I don't know, 150 pounds at the time of filming. Like he was super thin, and I don't know if that was intentional or he was just like in that kind of state because of what he's gone through in the war. But man, he looked like he was like a starving human being, but he was giving out to everyone else. So I think that actually helped. And I hate to say it's almost like a Jesus Christ kind of thing, but we're talking like a really skinny guy giving out tons of money to people. So I thought that kind of visual was kind of like, I don't know if it was just subtle or subconscious, but it helped that he was like super thin, I think.
Yeah, whether that's on purpose or not is up for debate, but I think you really get a good Jimmy Stewart performance, I think. And I think especially like there's a moment when he questions why they have so many kids. And I don't know about you, but I always react to that because like maybe he said I don't know that he says anything worse than that. Like literally questioning why they have so many children.
I mean, didn't he tell his daughter to stop playing the piano? It's like,
I mean, that's mean, but he's not
Yeah.
questioning her existence in that moment.
I get you, man, but it felt like it also kind of contributed to like the editing too, because like that span of what 4 or 5 years goes by really quick, and they go from like no kids to 4 kids in like I don't know a minute or two. So maybe it was just like him kind of reflecting with the audience, like, hey, where'd all these kids come from? I don't know, because that's what it felt like too when I was watching. I was like, is he making a joke because these kids like came out of nowhere in the montage, or? But it added to it. So those little things with the script, like I said, the little details with the script, you can add to it. It just kind of, it makes it better. And then in terms of Mr. Potter, I guess comparing the sizes, I mean, this dude is what? The Jabba the Hutt of the town? Overweight, has like guy pushing him in a chair, treats everyone like dirt. Not dirt, but as like a dollar sign, I guess. But, I mean, he's definitely Potter the Hutt, I think. So,
Lionel Barrymore, he is so good in this movie. I mean, I haven't seen him in a lot of stuff. Like the only other thing that's really memorable in my mind is Key Largo. That's the other thing that I remember seeing him in. But man, Lionel Barrymore is so deliciously evil in this movie, and it's wild just what he is able to do with not moving. Like he's literally in the chair the entire time. And seemingly, like every other character, doesn't really age. He is an angry, bitter old man in perpetuity. But I think he is a perfect representation of this kind of old capitalist. Like, I think we very much associate modern capitalism with like your tech bros and things of that nature. But I think in terms of like the old school, like evil banker capitalist, like this is a perfect rendition of that. And I think one of the accusations that has been made, I don't think you could make this argument now, but this movie was accused of being communist. And I have to tell you, if you think this movie is communist, then boy, oh boy, have I got some bad news for you. Because if this movie were really socialist and communist, Mr. Potter would have been hung up in the town square and you would have seen red flags go up. Like that's what it would take for this movie to be really communist. I think in a lot of ways, and obviously watching this through a modern lens, like this is kind of a conservative movie. Like I think the value, like George is made to see the value of his life living in this small town, and I think there is hope to that, and I think there is value to that. But I also think there is kind of an inherently conservative thought process, especially because we're idealizing this man who lives in a small town. So I think that's part of it. And also there's a lot of connections to religion, and that doesn't really bother me. Like I am an atheist, but I think the way that they handle religion, I think it actually works out pretty well because the relationship with religion is not to a specific faith. It's more about literally praying to a God. And there is an active God that saves the day, which I think if you are telling like a fairy tale, which this kind of is, I think that works. Like I don't really have a problem with that. I think I appreciate the fact that they start with all of the people praying for George, and then that transitions into telling his life story before Clarence goes down to help George discover what a wonderful life he has had. But I think the relationship with religion is interesting. But again, I think this movie, especially by today's standards, is pretty conservative.
I mean, you could easily redub it and just be like not even an angel. You know what I mean? Like you could just call it something else because there's no real like clear, like connection to like Christianity with like a cross or anything. Like the prayer thing, you can kind of maybe even redub too, but it's kind of interchangeable. It feels like it doesn't totally feel like a Christian movie. even though like, I mean, it is angels or whatever, but it still feels like it wasn't like an angel with wings coming down from the heavens and these heavenly looking things. It was just like a dude. You know what I mean? So they made it like more grounded. So I think by doing that, you kind of remove that. It kind of makes it more accessible because, you don't want to alienate a part of the audience, obviously. But going into this and halfway through, I didn't have any of those kind of feelings at all. You know what I mean? So for me, it was fine. And yeah, I can kind of see the conservative republicanism in this as well. I definitely don't think it's communist for sure. I think that was just the paranoia of the Red Scare at the time and all that stuff. And we know that history and the craziness that went, with the hearings and the accusations and all the bullshit that went with it. But looking past that, it's obvious it's like it's a movie for the people. It's a movie about keeping communities together as opposed to kicking people out. It just instead of having the highest price bidder come in, you know what I mean, about maintaining that community. Because a lot of the people go up to George at the end. Spoiler alert. You know what I mean? They're contributing the money that they lost in the 8,000, but they're just saying like, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have a roof over my head. And like everyone practically says that in the town. So that goes to show you the kind of values. You know what I mean? It's like Potter wants to kick these people out. They can't afford it, but he wants to keep the people in there to kind of keep the community going and striving and bank on the long term as just opposed to like cutting things short on the on the short term. So there's different philosophies of finance and living situations and stuff like that. So it's interesting. I mean, I can easily see people siding with Potter easily in today's world, like no doubt. But different philosophies. But there wasn't that comeuppance, like I said, which I guess I don't know. I guess it kind of rubbed me the wrong way at first, but I kind of accept it now. It just sucks seeing that people give up their personal money to replace the money that dude has that he should have been for the bank. It's just that wrong feeling, but I guess that's part of that real grounded realism about life. So that kind of does happen. I mean, 2008, hello. So there you go.
I mean, as important as the $8,000 is, like the only reason it's important is because George is going to go to jail. Like, I don't think that anyone in that town is necessarily prioritizing their money, except because that is literally how you need to survive in capitalism. I mean, you see very much just how terrible capitalism is, and I mean that's it. It basically kills George's father. It drags George down, and not like capitalism is why he's basically unable to fulfill his dreams in a lot of ways. So, I mean, I think you see the dangers of capitalism throughout this movie, and I think that's what makes it such a fascinating piece because I don't think you get a lot of these levels of critique, especially in modern movies. Like you don't see that, and I think that might be another reason why it's harder to picture like this movie being made or remade or what have you. So let's talk about a couple of other elements of the movie. Donna Reed, of course, plays Mary Bailey. What did you think of their chemistry? It's Mary Bailey is a really tough person to talk about because she's really not a character. So I'm very curious to know, what did you think of their chemistry?
It kind of got lost in the second half. I mean, they really built it up in that prom night scene, or not prom, but that dance night scene. But then it gets cut short, and then you don't really get that back. Because like even when they get married, it's like he's rejecting her subconsciously, but he doesn't want to necessarily push her away because he's in love with her. But then it kind of becomes this like tension, like not romantic, but like conflicting tension. But that was probably intentional because of what George is going through. But for her, like she didn't really get this arc. Like she didn't get her. I thought it was weird that like she didn't get her own job. Like I figured like that would be the kind of like her mentality. And I don't know if it's just because it's 1948 and that's just the mentality then. But I mean, the fact that she was going out and helping George, I thought, oh, maybe she's just working in the office too. But I guess she just decided to stay home with the kids. And that was kind of unfortunate because I wanted to see more of her like in the office. But I guess that's just the modern thinking, I guess, because I'm so used to seeing that kind of, women in the workplace now in movies and TV. So I thought that was kind of odd, but I guess it's just 1947, 1948. But, I think she did a good job in terms of her performance. She was kind of like all googly eyed for George at the beginning, and then she kind of maintains it, which, credit to her, because the way he was kind of like mentally declining, I would have just been like, not having it. But she stuck along with it with a smile up until that point. So, I credit to her performance for that. It's just, there probably could have been more, obviously. But again, it's 2 hours and 10 minutes, and the focus is on George. and a lot of it's on, like, mostly George. So I kind of get why they had to do that, but definitely the second half, she gets definitely cut short. But it was just kind of weird to see her like freaking out in that alternate universe. I guess it's because it's the multiverse, but I don't know. It was just kind of weird because like she seemed like she was like claustrophobic or some kind of phobic or some kind of phobia of people, and that's why she's become this librarian or something. But there was like this underlying thing that they didn't really discuss.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that really needed to get hashed out. Like, I just don't buy that Mary Bailey would end up just because this one man would not want to marry her doesn't mean that like 10 other dudes would want to marry her too. Like, that is probably the part of it that bothers me the most in a lot of ways, because I think everything else that happens like in the alternate universe, I think actually works out pretty well. Like, just the way that the different characters act and all that business. I actually think that works out really well. I think the best moment, I'm put best in quotes, but like I think the conversation that he has with his mom is probably the one that strikes me the most. And we don't get a lot with the mom either. Again, I mean, a movie in the 1940s is not going to give the female characters a lot to do, but yeah, just the heartbreaking conversation with his mom and kind of how their relationship develops. And the other thing I will say is that I think there's some really good performances in this movie. And in no way am I blaming the actor for this, because I think that, look, black actors did not get a lot of roles. And just the fact that there is a black person in this movie is probably a really big deal. But Lillian Randolph as kind of the housemaid, boy, was she written to be a cartoon. And just every line, it was like he was in a sitcom. And that kind of took me out of the movie at times.
Sometimes it was cringe, but sometimes it kind of fit the moment, and I get what they were trying to do. But again, with 2022 vision, you know what I mean? It's not good. It's very caricaturish, but again, it's 1948, and well, I'm not giving it a pass or anything, but I'm just kind of explaining the context of it. But she does her role well, and I did laugh at a few lines, but only because just timing is everything with lines, so she nailed her timing.
Yeah, I mean, again, I want to emphasize that I'm not blaming the actor for this. I think this is about like the very racist reality of this situation. Like that's the problem. She probably was directed into this performance. But how about the fact that there was a Bert and Ernie? Were you amused by that? Now, Bert and Ernie are not based on this Bert and Ernie. I just want to point that out.
I mean, it's so weird that the combination of those two names. I mean, the only time you've heard that is in Sesame Street, right? So it's just so weird to hear it beforehand, and the only other time you've heard it is this other time. It's like, you would think it would be the origin, but because I mean, they were probably playing this in the '60s, right, and on TV. So obviously, that's enough time for the writers of the '70s to hear that. But I don't know. It's just very odd timing, and I would like to think it's their origin story.
I don't think so, but you can believe whatever you want to believe. So, in terms of other aspects of this movie, anything else that you would like to review over?
Oh, I thought Clarence was excellent. We needed more Clarence. Way more
I think
Clarence.
I think I don't know that I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think he does a really great job. I think this is a very, very difficult performance because, like, on the one hand, he's kind of an antagonist, but on the other hand, like, he's also like he's the one that is going to help George realize the value of his life. So it's a very, very tricky role, and I think playing it playfully, I think is actually kind of the secret sauce to making the character work. Because again, there's a version of this where if you're talking like a Black Mirror type, like it's you could like make it more of a monkey's paw situation, but I think going in more playful and calm and like he never gets angry with George. Like no matter what George does, no matter what George says, Clarence never gets angry. And I think that's really crucial for the performance because I think if he tries to match Jimmy Stewart's anxiety and anger, I think that breaks the movie.
Yeah, he kind of reminded me of Batmite, right? But a good version of Batmite that doesn't annoy the shit out of you. And what was the name of the one from the Flintstones? That Martian?
Gizmo, is that it?
I think that it's the same role. You know what I mean? It's like the guardian angel that's not really there, that only the person can see. But in this case, he's actually seen by the alternate universe, which I thought was really cool because originally I thought, oh, no one's gonna see him. But then he comes in and orders a drink, so I was like, okay, so they can see him. But I think I just wanted more of him because he just kind of brings this smile to my face in this performance, and I wish that was kind of stretched out over most of the movie. But they saved it for the third act, and I kind of get why structurally. But that would be like the Twilight Zone part of the movie. You know what I mean? That's the part of the movie where I'm like, okay, this is definitely really good Twilight Zone stuff right now, and I'm kind of expecting like that dun 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 to hear like at the end of this, but. That would have been really too dark. And I think in another universe, that would have been a darker ending where he's just stuck there and he can't get out. So that would have sucked.
I want to point out that the character from the Flintstones was the Great Gazoo. So I was close, but it is the Great Gazoo. And also a great example of a show jumping the shark because the Great Gazoo was a terrible character.
Oh, I know. And they put him in the Viva Rock Vegas movie, and I was just like, and I hated that movie.
No, terrible, terrible idea. Just very, very
Even
bad.
Even as a kid, I hated it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not great. So, in the end, of course, George learns the value of the impact that he has made on everybody's life, and he does kind of this 180. I think the iconic scene, like it's been seen to death, I think. Whenever, like, I think when you see scenes in other media, I think you typically see one of three things. You see the very, very end where they're all celebrating and singing. You see the scene with George attempting to commit suicide, or you see George running through the town and wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. Like, I think those are your three possibilities. The best line of the movie to me, Brian, actually takes place because George wishes everyone a Merry Christmas, including Mr. Potter, and Mr. Potter with an all-time great comeback. Happy New Year in jail. Love it. Yeah. I love that line.
Well, mine was actually the alternate universe bar tender guy. Because I guess he overheard the part where about Clarence says, whenever a bell rings, an angel gets his wings, right? So he kicks them out of the bar, and then he rings up the register like 3 or 4 times. Hey, here's some angels getting some wings. Ding, 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 ding. And I thought that was so cold-blooded for like 1948. I was just laughing, man. I was like, damn, he went there, like making fun of him like that. So that really stuck out for me in terms of a line because I thought that was just like so like cold-blooded, man. For like for like a movie like this to just make fun of that. But yeah, that was good. You would think I would, save it for the angel gets its wings is the best line, but I thought that was like the best parody or making fun of that line at that moment. So
yeah, that's pretty funny stuff. So is there any doubt about the best performance? I mean, it's Jimmy Stewart, right?
Absolutely, but it's just the strong ensemble surrounding him.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Bailey, Uncle Bailey. I think I'm like a Billy.
I have very conflicting feelings about. I think he has a couple really good moments, but that character is bitten. I'll be honest. Every time I watch this movie, about halfway through, I'm like, why doesn't George fire him? Like, he never does anything right. Like, he's bad.
The little things about his office I thought were really funny because, I mean, if you watch it again and again, you'll start noticing different animals in the room. Like, I didn't even know what was going on until I started noticing that was flying through the office. And then I don't know if it was a ferret or something. There's like a bunch of animals in there. So he's like an animal guy. So I guess that's supposed to reveal his kind of character, that he's a caring guy, but he's a drunk, an unreliable drunk that gives away the money on accident to Mr. Potter in the bank. But I kept thinking the whole time, he knows he put it in the envelope. So why doesn't he just, I don't know. He couldn't retrace his steps. And I don't know if that was the alcohol or whatever, but God bless his soul. He tried.
I'll say, yeah, it's pretty extraordinary, just how this all worked out. So, for me, again, this is a stone cold classic, and I think this is one of the best American movies that's ever been made, and I think in many ways is kind of unimpeachable, and I don't think you're ever going to get something like this again, just because I think it's so unique, and I think at this point, every Christmas movie has to have like. It's Christmas for like the whole movie. Like that's clearly the thematic element of it. And it just feels like there's so much Christmas media that gets put out every single year, and Hallmark is so guilty of this because they release so many of these goddamn movies that are all the same. It gets very, very frustrating, and then you come back to something like It's a Wonderful Life, which is it's so different. Like, yes, the last half hour I think in many ways is similar to to things that we've seen, but this movie, I think, for the first 90 minutes, the themes that it goes through, the things that it says about its characters, I really appreciate the totality of this movie. In terms of thinking about this as a Christmas movie, like you almost have to downgrade it because again, it's not a Christmas movie. Like I could almost argue that Die Hard is more of a Christmas movie than It's a Wonderful Life because Die Hard actually takes place on Christmas Eve, and It's a Wonderful Life really only it's the last half hour, 40 minutes that takes place during Christmas. So in terms of thinking about this like as a Christmas movie, like it's definitely not as pure, but I think in terms of this as a movie, I think this is one of the best that's ever been done. And also, again, I will reiterate, this is my favorite Jimmy Stewart performance. And I would say, again, he's done some really great work. Like for me, my second favorite is probably either Rear Window or Rope. But this is my number one.
I'll say number one for me because I've seen not a lot, but I've probably seen like 7 or 8 Jimmy Stewart. I'd even throw in the Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and then he's not even like I think he's second billed in that one too. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for me. Totally agree with you. I was taken aback by the whole script or the way the story is scripted out and the way it was structured. Totally expecting this Christmas Carol type setting where it's going to be all flashbacks and stuff, but no, they went totally straightforward, and I really appreciate that. So a really big change for me. And yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not really a Christmas movie. Like this could be interchangeable, but it does make it seem with this town that is always like a lot of snow. It kind of has that feel to it. So it kind of embraces it at the end. So I love this movie. It makes me want to watch some more Jimmy Stewart now because I got some movies on Blu-ray that I haven't seen in a while. Now with you mentioned Rope and Rear Window, man, maybe I'll have a little marathon. So we'll see.
Yeah, I would strongly recommend Anatomy of a Murder is also a really good one too. I mean, he's been in a lot of really good movies. Hot take. Have you ever seen The Philadelphia Story?
No, but now that you mentioned Anatomy of a Murder,
Wow.
I forgot to see that too. Because I saw that like relatively recently, and I was kind of like, it was a twist ending that was good that I didn't see coming. So he's really good at those like dramas that have like these good endings that you don't see coming. Also, the Man Who Knew Too Much, gotta recommend that one too. He's doing a lot of running in that one, but I think his co-star kind of overtakes the lead on that one. That's my opinion.
Interesting. You need to see The Philadelphia Story. It's a really good movie. Also on my list as well. There's a lot of Jimmy Stewart on my list, actually.
Yeah. We could do a whole month if we wanted, but we got plans.
Yeah, we do have plans, which we will get to in just a moment. So for me, this is a 10 out of 10. If the Christmas part is important, like maybe it's like a 7.5 or an 8. But for me, this movie is a 10 out of 10.
I'll stick with my 9. It'll probably grow over time, but right now I'm just kind of impressed with what I saw. I don't know, what are we at? 70 years later, 60 years later, something like that. Just crazy stuff with the maintaining of the consistency of the writing is what I was most impressed with.
So I want to say this is the one. So we've like had our morality, our takeaways. This movie actually has the takeaway in text form, Brian. I think you know what I'm about to say, right?
I hope you have it written down.
Dear George, remember, no man is a failure who has friends. That is, of course, the moral. I mean, that's it.
And if you've seen Into the Wild, that definitely makes the connection to the ending of Into the Wild. Just saying.
It does, but it's the one piece of media where the moral of the story is literally written down for you.
And they did. And then I don't know if Love Actually took this idea too, but the opening credits was not a crawl. It was a series of posters with writing on them, and I couldn't help but think of Love Actually. But you never know with these influences.
Yeah, I mean everything. There's a lot of heavy influence on each other, and Love Actually, in many ways, I think shares a lot of DNA with It's a Wonderful Life, which is probably a discussion for another time. But for us, I mean that's it. We are done with Christmas. Like it's a few days before Christmas, as most of you are probably listening to this. So we are going to be transitioning away from talking about Christmas, of course, because it will be the new year. Next week, you will get to hear Kevin Ford and I discuss the second and final season of Togetherness as we are considering our canceled too soon series. But Brian and I will be coming back in 2 weeks with a totally new concept with Pantheon Plus. Brian and I are both going to be doing a month of underrated sequels. We're not going to say what those are yet because I think our lists are respective lists.
95% finalized, maybe a minor change or two. Maybe.
There may be a change or two, so I don't necessarily want to say what they are going to be, but January and February are going to be our time to shine as we will be discussing a number of very, very important underrated sequels, which we'll be covering a lot of genres. I think for me, there's a couple of recent sequels that I want to hash out. I am making Brian watch Terminator. I will tell you, this is not going to change. At some point, we will be discussing Terminator Dark Fate, and I'm finally making Brian watch Terminator Dark Fate.
I saw a clip online of John Connor, and oh my God, my childhood just shot away.
Well, all I'm gonna say is we're gonna hash it out, and the best part is that we will also be able to have an extended James Cameron conversation because Avatar 2 will have come out, and we will be able to discuss box office.
I think I'm one of those people that doesn't like True Lies as most people do, so we can also have that discussion because apparently I'm like the odd man out on that one. Really want my friends.
I don't understand how you don't like how you of all people don't like True Lies.
If I had to pick Arnold doing comedy, I guess I would go with Kindergarten Cop over True Lies, to be honest.
Oh my God! All right, well, we're gonna clearly have to have that discussion, but that is one of the movies that you can look forward to. So we will be back in 2 weeks to discuss some underrated sequels for Brian. My name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you again in the new year.
Wait a minute. How can Clarence take a drink? I thought angels were forbidden from imbibing alcohol.